At some point, every trader is going to cut and run. They're going to realize at some point that they're on the wrong side of the trade. And what's going to make the Chinese realize this is the extent to which we have just upped the ante. You know, it's one thing when they have $1 trillion and we're asking them to loan us another 50 billion, another 100 billion, then they can weigh, well, if I don't loan them this extra 50 billion, then I could lose this whole trillion, and it's small enough as a percentage that they get dumb enough to do it. I mean, we did that for a while with Latin America, where the Latin American banks would keep coming to a U.S. bank and say, look, if you don't loan me more money, I'm just going to default on what you've already loaned me. And the bankers would say, well, we don't want to do that. We don't have to write these loans down. Sure. So yeah, here's a little bit more. Eventually, you know, they realize that they did this, that it's just going to be forever. Well, what are we basically telling the Chinese? We are proposing $1 trillion a year deficits, right? And we got China penciled in for like half. Well, they're making it easier, and they're trying to get Chinese to buy gold. Why do you think they're doing that? Because they think gold's going down? They know it's going up. It can't do anything but go up because they're going to dump their dollars. In fact, in one of the recent interviews, you know, they asked, you know, they admitted they want to buy gold. They want more gold, but they don't want to push up the price, right? So they're looking to buy dips, right? They want gold. If they can swap all their dollars for gold today, they do it in a heartbeat. Problem is they can't, because they can't find buyers for the dollars, and they can't find sellers for the gold. But, you know, obviously, you know, both the people in this room, you know, you're not in the same predicament as China. You can sell all your dollars, buy all the gold you want, because it's a small amount. But China's in a much more difficult situation, but they are preparing. Look at what they just did. China just sold, for the first time ever, bonds denominated in RMB, in their own currency. Now, first of all, I said, why are the Chinese selling bonds? Why are they borrowing money? They don't need that money. They got 2.3 trillion in reserve, right? You know, why would they borrow? That's like, why would Bill Gates take out a car loan, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. They're doing it to try to create a bond market for their currency. Well, why would they be doing that? Well, obviously, they're trying to prepare, set the stage to move away from the U.S. dollar. That's what they're doing. They're creating liquidity in their currency. The world is gearing up for this, and we're like whistling past this graveyard, like it's not even happening. You know, this should be front story on the evening news every night. I mean, this is a big thing. Our credit card is about to be taken away. I mean, the reason that this country has been able to survive all these years is because we can print money instead of making stuff. See, normally when you trade products. We make products and we trade them for the products other people make. But because the dollar is the reserve currency, we don't have to make anything. We just print. And you don't need any capital to run a printing press. You just need ink. Right? And so we can pay for all sorts of things. That is going to stop. You know, the reason the dollar was the reserve currency was because it was as good as gold. Before the dollar was the reserve currency, money was backed by gold, or currency was backed by gold, which is money. That's what gives it value. It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't cost anything to print. What gives it value is that there's gold there. Gold is expensive to mine. Gold just can't be, you know, made out of thin air. But what happened is at the end of the Second World War, we had all the gold, and we basically told the world, look, why back your currencies with gold? Just back them with a dollar. It's good as gold. For every $35 you have, we'll give you an ounce of gold. No problem. Meanwhile, we'll pay you interest. So we got the world to move off of the dollar standard onto the gold standard. That's what we did. We conned them. Now, the minute that happened, of course, politicians took advantage of that, particularly in the 1960s, right? The politicians had some big ideas. We had a war on poverty. We were going to make a great society. We were going to go to the moon. We were fighting in Vietnam. All these great things that politicians wanted to do, but they didn't want to pay for any of it. So we had deficits. And we kept exporting our dollars, which of course were backed by gold at the time. But a few smart people realized, wait a minute, America doesn't have this much gold. And they began to present their dollars to the U.S. Treasury for gold. And then the politicians had a choice to make. Do we fess up, devalue the dollar, cut back on all this spending, and No, they chose to default. And they told the world, we're not going to pay. It's basically like this, those checks are no good, we're not going to give you the gold that we promised. Now, the dollar lost about 2/3 of its value in the 6 or 7 years following that. And all of the inflation of the 1970s, people try to say, well, the inflation of the 70s was because of an oil shock, it was because of this. No, it was because of the value of the dollar. That's why oil prices went up. Oil prices didn't go up. The value of the dollar went down. That's all that happened. The price of oil is about the same as today as it was in 1970. Oil was $3 a barrel in 1970, but gold was $35 an ounce. You know, the relationship is pretty much the same today. A little bit different, but not much. Even though oil is $70 a barrel, $75 a barrel, it's gone up from 3 to 75. It's barely changed in terms of real money, in terms of gold, you know, about the same. So we had all that inflation. But what the world did, and this was the mistake the world made, instead of, you know, once we told the world there's no gold behind the dollar, they should have said, fine, we're going back on the gold standard. We're not on the dollar standard. They stuck with the dollar. And that was the problem, because when, you know, if you own the Norwegian krone, and someone says, well, what gives a krone value? What's it backed by? Well, it's backed by dollars. Okay, well, what gives the dollar value? Well, it's backed by gold. Okay, so in effect, the krone was backed by gold, because it was backed by the dollar. But now, when the dollar is no longer backed by gold, so, well, what's the kroner backed by? Well, it's backed by dollars. What's the dollar backed by? Nothing. Well, then the kroner is backed by nothing. So it doesn't work. So, but instead, they kept accepting the dollar as if it was still gold. And the minute that happened, our politicians, well, hey, this is great. This is fantastic. You know, we can dole out whatever goodies we want. And our whole economy was able to degenerate from a manufacturing economy to a service sector economy, because all the stuff that we didn't manufacture, we can get by printing money. And so we flooded the world with this paper, and we got all their stuff. But our whole standard of living, all the malls, all the shopping centers, all that is all about the dollar being the reserve currency. If it wasn't the reserve currency, we couldn't import stuff unless we can export stuff. That's how all the other countries work. So this is what's about to change. That whole lifestyle is going to change. And this is the real crisis. This is the real collapse that's coming. Maybe it's in 2010, maybe it's in 2011, that, you know, and the dollar falls, and then the Fed, you know, there's all this talk about the Fed exit strategy. How are we going to exit from this monetary policy? There's no way out. There's no exit. The only way to exit is not to enter. You know, once you leverage everybody up like this, you can't take that leverage away, right? Because if the government raises interest rates, all the entities they bailed out are going to fail again. Home prices are going to start falling. Stock market's going to start coming down. And now we have a bigger mess because there's even more debt. It's a bigger problem. So if they didn't have the guts to deal with the problem last year, how are they going to deal with it next year when it's even bigger? You know? But maybe they'll have no choice. Right now, they're able to do it. The government is able to bail out everybody because Germany, because Japan, and China bailed the government out. But when that ends, so then the choice for the Federal Reserve is going to have, and the government's going to have a very big choice in a couple of years, maybe next year. The choice is, when the world moves away from the dollar, we are either going to dramatically increase interest rates, not just 2% or 3%, but 8%, 10%, 12%, and just let the chips fall where they may. Let housing prices come down. Let banks fail. Let depositors lose their money. Let pensions fail. Don't bail them out. Let people lose their jobs. That is what they're going to have to do to avoid an even bigger disaster. See, that's the good choice. If they do that, we're lucky, right? If we just have this major collapse, you know, we got off easy. Because the alternative is the politicians stick to the playbook. And they say, well, more stimulus. If foreigners won't buy our bonds, then we're going to buy them, we're going to print the money, and we're going to just print. And we're going to do exactly what Zimbabwe did. We'll do exactly what Weimar Republic Germany did, exactly what Argentina did. The politicians will try to print their way out of it, and that is the biggest disaster. And that is the collapse that I'm prepared for. That's what my whole investment strategy is all about. It's about the collapse of the value of the dollar, and what that also does to undermine our free market economy, because you can't have a market economy where money is collapsing. And the other problem is, as this economy is falling apart, instead of the government understanding that its regulations and its taxes are the root cause of these problems, they are regulating and taxing even more. And we're moving more away from a free market model to central government planning, to decisions about resource allocation being made in Washington for political reasons, not being made in Main Street by individual entrepreneurs with a profit motive.